disaster to highlight the plight of the people back home. Ladies and gentlemen, while Pakistan was facing the challenges caused by global adverse developments like Russian-Ukraine war, energy crisis, rising inflation and hiking poverty, Pakistan faced the catastrophe of unprecedented floods in the recent history. Allow me to reiterate the widespread damages caused by the floods in Pakistan. Last year, the heavy monsoon rains, 6 times of the average of the past 30 years, caused huge flooding and devastation, especially in the provinces of Sindh and Balochistan. The damages were extensive, with 33 million people affected, over 1,700 lives lost, 13,000 injuries, millions of women and children becoming vulnerable. A total of over 13,000 kilometers of roads and 440 bridges were destroyed, while 5 million acres of crop were damaged. Over 2 million houses were either damaged or destroyed, and around 1 million livestock was confirmed to have been dead or missing. Ladies and gentlemen, a significant portion of the country remained submerged in water for months, affecting subsequent crop cycle and closing down schools and hospitals and making large portion of the rural hinterland inaccessible. The standing buildings were used as temporary shelters and to provide necessary services. It is estimated that 22,000 schools were affected, leaving 3.5 million students without access to classrooms. This is leading to a learning crisis in the country, and it will take coordinated efforts and resources to rebuild the education system. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the government of Pakistan placed recovery and rehabilitation of the affected people as its most important priority. Through Benazir Income Support Program, rupees 70 billion were dispersed as emergency measure to the flood affectees, families, and till now, 8.17 million flood victims have been given the cash assistance. As a result, 2.7 million families got straight away cash relief and the other assistance which was immediately required. We are appreciative of the fact that the World Bank promptly announced $1.6 billion assistance for rehabilitation in flood areas and an additional 500 million for building climate resilient Pakistan. You are aware that PDNA estimated economic and physical losses caused by the floods as over $30 billion. According to their calculation, which are jointly conducted by World Bank, UNDP, European Union, and Asian Development Bank with the assistance of the Planning Ministry of Pakistan, their calculation of the needs for the rehabilitation and reconstruction work is $16.3 billion. We have been working to obviously plan this reconstruction and rehabilitation work over the period of 3 years, with at least half of the requirements to be met by Pakistan own a system and assistance. Our GDP, keeping in view of the size of the GDP, we believe that over the next 3 years period for this phase of reconstruction and rehabilitation, we should be able to contribute $8 billion out of the $16.3 billion to carry out this rehabilitation and the reconstruction work. The support from the friendly countries and the multilateral donors will not only help with flood relief and rehabilitation effort, but will also create fiscal space and external debt sustainability for the country, reinforcing its efforts to implement the ongoing IMF program. The climate change has led to devastating spillover impacts on Pakistan. This is a major exogenous shock representing a global public externality. Pakistan contributes less than 1% of greenhouse gas emissions, but yet it has found itself at the center of climate change-induced devastation in the form of catastrophe of the floods last year. Concerns about food security are paramount. Social stability is also a concern amid high energy prices, inflation, and macroeconomic policies. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I want to make it clear that Pakistan remains committed to its international obligations and is on track regarding our macroeconomic fiscal reform agenda, which focuses on increasing our revenues, increasing spending on social sector programs, decreasing expenditure wherever we can moderate, and creating thereby more fiscal space for the reconstruction rehabilitation phase, which we have to undertake in the next 3 years. Pakistan is right now facing challenges on account of additional outlays incurred and projected for the flood-related rescue, relief, and rehabilitation needs. Existing limited space negatively impacts Pakistan's ability to provide resilience and determination to all those affected by the natural disaster. While appreciating the resilience and determination of the people of Pakistan, it is obvious that they need help and global cooperation, which we are thankful to all those who have been extending and communicating to us. Pakistan is carrying out the fiscal reforms necessary for long-term recovery and sustainability. However, we believe that we urgently need short-term assistance as we navigate through a number of challenges. We hope that our friends, partners, and supporters, as always, stand with us by providing the required assistance during this most critical phase of Pakistan. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan's urgent expectations from this conference is not only merely a commitment of resource for rehabilitation and reconstruction in the short to medium term, but also we are looking forward for on-budget inflows and assistance during the remainder of the current fiscal year in order to make it possible for the government of Pakistan to continue providing the much-needed relief to the flood affectees of 33 million people in Pakistan. Let me say a few words that, if considered appropriate by our friendly countries, debt swaps and other use of financial instruments tied to reallocation of equivalent domestic budgetary resources would also free up the resources to be spent for this noble purpose. We must remember that we are in this fight against climate-induced disaster together. There is only one world, and we must work together to support each other in times of crisis. Pakistan is extremely grateful for the support of the international community as we strive to recover, rehabilitate, and rebuild. At the end, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to all those friendly countries, United Nations, World Bank, Asian Development Bank, Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, Islamic Development Bank, and all other multilateral institutions, NGOs, and donors, without whose help we could not have been able to deal with this catastrophe which Pakistan just faced in 2022. I'm extremely grateful to all of you, and thank you for patience listening. God bless you all. Thank you. Very kind.
I now request His Excellency Mr. Achim Steiner, the UNDP Administrator, to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, the Minister of Finance of Pakistan, distinguished ministers and fellow panelists, dear Martin, my colleague from the World Bank. Let me also, on behalf of the United Nations Development Programme, join the Secretary General and my co-chair in welcoming you both to this meeting here, but also to an attempt to break new ground. I was just looking at the presence of ministers of Pakistan on this podium. If you look from left to right, I think you will recognize that we are living in a different age in which climate change, natural disasters, economy, planning, and indeed the development pathways of countries are being rewritten by circumstance, sometimes by design at others, by disasters on other occasions. Just a few months ago, Pakistan endured one of the most destructive climate-induced disasters in recorded history. We have heard from the Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister, from you, my dear co-chair, just now, some of the numbers. But behind those numbers lie destroyed livelihoods, lost lives, but above all, the extraordinary challenge of how do you restore hope when you are faced with such a gigantic task, and to do so on the back of a reality where Pakistan, like virtually every other country over the last 2-3 years, was just emerging from COVID-19, a pandemic, and all that it did to our societies. Today, the floodwaters may have partially receded, but what remains is a monumental moment of reckoning for the entire world. The Secretary General spoke to it, the Prime Minister, and so together with international partners, including the United Nations, Pakistan is now undertaking an urgent and extraordinary initiative to save lives, restore livelihoods, and rebuild a nation. Pakistan, as you just said, Minister, faces a long road to recovery. The wider world faces a choice, because the truth is that these events are increasingly predictable, and only the latest in a series of such disasters in Pakistan and beyond, historic climate events that are becoming the new normal. Today, on the 9th of January, we are meeting. Look to the east in Australia, extraordinary flood events. Look to the west in California, extreme weather events. Look to Central Europe, and people are wondering what happened to snow in winter. We are living in profoundly changing times. And in Pakistan, at this moment, we have an opportunity to choose a new direction with an innovative model for international cooperation. And I have to say that when just a few weeks ago we began an intense effort of convening and organizing this conference here, framed not as a pledging conference, but really as a conference about how we move beyond reacting to every disaster by having just an emergency response. This conference is being convened by Pakistan and the United Nations with a different logic and also a different aspiration. And I hope that by the time that you leave this conference venue this evening, you will feel reassured that the call to the world that Pakistan sent out to friends, supporters, partners, to step up at this critical moment has actually been responded to. A few weeks ago, that was not at all self-evident. I must say today, I feel extremely excited about the prospect of framing a new form of response and partnership. It is time to step up and support the long-term, the systems-based approaches to recovery when disaster strikes again. Pakistan, and that is a recognition that I think the world also recognized, is not in its plight alone. And indeed, it is not even in the broader context of climate change one of the most significant emitters, less than 1%. And yet it is, in terms of its ranking on the Global Climate Risk Index, the 8th most vulnerable country in the world. And to those who say, well, is climate change and flood events really linked? How else would you explain what Pakistan in just one decade has been experiencing, not in terms of just on its own, But remember the images of the last 12 months, of forest fires, of droughts, of floods, of extreme weather events, hurricanes, typhoons. This is the new normal, and we need to, as an international community, find a way in which we together can respond to this new normal. The government of Pakistan, as you have also laid out just now, is doing its part in recovery and reconstruction, but it will need financial and technical support to tackle the massive development challenges that lie ahead, including building the systems for resilience. Advancing reconstruction of this type will require fiscal space on the back of COVID-19 that is currently severely constrained in Pakistan, as you also said, Minister. Creating this space will require new pathways for support, including private sector investments facilitated by innovative financial instruments, including the de-risking of private capital and support for a pipeline of broader investment opportunities, including some of the innovative forms that you mentioned just now. Here and now, that process must begin with new investments in climate resilience, broader coalitions of partners, and just a look around this room and the announcements you will hear today will, I think, illustrate that this is not a desired future. It is now becoming, through the experience that Pakistan has gone through, a reality that we all are part of. And critically, collective responsibility for the shocking loss and damage from which no nation will be immune in the future, as also the Foreign Minister of Switzerland pointed out in his opening remarks. Assessing the extent of damages and losses has been a pivotal part of this joint response under the leadership of the Ministry of Planning, Development and Special Initiatives, the United Nations, together with the Asia Development Bank, the European Union and the World Bank, and our UN sister agencies also in the UN country team, work together with you to complete the post-disaster needs assessment, the foundation for today's framework for recovery. And it identified some 16 billion in urgently needed financing to support the recovery. The assessment directly informed this resilient recovery, rehabilitation, reconstruction framework, the 4RF. We always have strange ways of baptizing these very real things into very technocratic language, but 4RF it is. A comprehensive policy-based approach comprising sectoral interventions, public and private sector financial strategies, and implementation and monitoring arrangements. We now look forward to the presentation of this framework, and I also want to particularly thank His Excellency Professor Ahsan Iqbal, the Minister of Planning, Development and Reform of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, for the excellent partnership that we as an international community, and I think, Martin, I speak on your behalf as well, have enjoyed in working together under great pressure, but also with great purpose and direction in the last few months. Thank you so much.
I now request His Excellency Professor Ahsan Iqbal, Minister for Planning, Development and Reform of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, to say a few words.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen.
Microphone, please, for His Excellency.
Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for coming here today to express solidarity with the people of Pakistan who have experienced worst climate disaster of recent times. Pakistan has faced floods in 2022, but as one of the most vulnerable countries to climate disasters, we face range of disasters that we experienced during 2022, starting with very high temperatures, forest fires, droughts, culminating into unprecedented floods within a short span of 4 months. Pakistan's disasters like torrential floods, glacial lake outburst flood, and just to mention that Pakistan has the highest snow after North Pole and South Pole in its northern areas, which is at the danger of melting and causing glacial lake outburst floodings. We face droughts, heat waves, earthquakes, and during this year, as I said, we have experienced almost all of them. the heat wave of 2022 was the hottest in 61 years. So I can safely say that Pakistan is in the eye of climate change storm. Disasters return period average has become shorter from 56 years in 1929 to only 5 to 6 years in 2005. So that shows that the frequency of disasters is increasing at a rapid pace. The horror of our coming era will be born out of heat, fire, water, and snow. Ladies and gentlemen, all these disasters have impacted our economy in a very serious manner. Huge economic losses due to damage of infrastructure and loss of crops, significant losses in GDP, higher poverty rates, great risk of preventable diseases, especially to most vulnerable segments, women, children, and elderly, unprecedented recovery and reconstruction needs, degradation of ecosystem, degradation of environment and climate, job loss and disruption. Women and girls are at risk of gender-based violence and child marriage, degradation of environment and climate, hyper poverty and hyper malnutrition. The worst part of the floods in 2022 was that it was not only a climate disaster, but it also turned into a human tragedy as it hit the 20 poorest districts of Pakistan. So those people who were already poor, who were already malnourished, have been thrown into a cycle of hyper poverty and hyper malnutrition. Next, please. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2022 floods were of a scale never seen before. 33 million people in different parts of Pakistan were affected. More than 1,700 have lost their lives, and 1/3 of them are children, and more than 8 million are displaced. And the two provinces, Sindh and Balochistan, have been almost completely devastated. But the other provinces, Punjab, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and our special regions in the north, have also been significantly impacted, but they continue to be most vulnerable to future disasters. Next. With the help of our development partners, we have also been able to identify what were the damages and losses due to these floods. We are very grateful to World Bank, Asian Development Bank, European Union, UN and its agencies, and other development partners for working as a team to document in shortest possible time the post-disaster need assessment report for Pakistan, which put $14.9 billion damage and $15.23 billion of economic loss, with combined cost of over $30 billion to Pakistan's economy. This was a massive blow and hit to an economy which was just beginning to recover from crisis. And this also makes Pakistan very unique. Ladies and gentlemen, every country has faced pandemic. Every country is today facing the supply shock, but no country has experienced a disaster of this scale that Pakistan has faced. So therefore, the case of Pakistan is very different and unique. The social sectors, housing, health, education, culture and heritage had serious damages. In infrastructure, road transport, railway communication, energy, water, sanitation, municipal services, community infrastructures were damaged. In our productive sectors, agriculture, food, livestock, fisheries, water resources, irrigation, commerce, and industries were damaged, and governance, social sustainability, inclusion of gender, social protection, livelihoods were lost. Next, please. The previous one, the previous, please, the previous. And let me here share with you that Pakistan was one of the first countries to adopt Sustainable Development Goals in 2015. We called SDGs as National Development Goals. Our parliament passed a resolution to adopt Sustainable Development Goals, and we started to work on SDGs right away. But these floods, ladies and gentlemen, have washed all the gains that we made during 7 years. Almost 9 million people have been pushed into poverty. Additional 7.6 million people are facing food insecurity. 17 million women and children are at greater risk of preventable diseases. 4.3 million people with job loss and disruption to their livelihoods, and more than 600,000 women and girls at risk of gender-based violence and child marriage due to disaster situation. Next, please. Next. Next. So towards recovery, ladies and gentlemen, we have developed a 4RF framework. Its details are there in your packet also. You can read in more greater detail how to have resilient recovery, rehabilitation and reconstruction framework.
वज़ीर मनसूबाबंदी की जानिब से डोनर्स कॉन्फ्रेंस में खिताब किया जा रहा है। शुरका को तबाही के बारे में आगाह किया गया। प्रेजेंटेशन के जरिए दुनिया को बताया जा रहा है कि पाकिस्तान के इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, ज़राअत और दीगर इंडस्ट्रीज़ को किस तरह से नुकसान पहुँचा। वज़ीर ख़जाना की जानिब से भी आलमी डोनर्स कॉन्फ्रेंस से खिताब किया गया। उन्होंने कहा कि 16 अरब डॉलर के नुकसान का तखमीना लगाया गया है। अगले 3 सालों में कम अज़ कम 8 अरब डॉलर्स की ज़रूरत पड़ेगी। बहाली के कामों के अलावा फिस्कल डेट को भी पाकिस्तान को देखना है। सैलाब की वजह से मईशत को भी नुकसान पहुंचा है। अभी आपको लिए चलेंगे वजीर इत्तलात सिंध शर्जील नाम मेमन इस वक्त मीडिया से गुफ्तगू कर रहे हैं।
सिंध हुकूमत कराची और